Zorum Chala Yenaya, Zorum Miki Mini Mombo, Chica Mombo, Chala, and a Zorum Chala, Mipadam Miki Zorum, Mipan Magic Zorum, Atenda, Chisor, Sinji Mombo. Ade so Miki Mini Zorum Kiramki, and I don't think Yapo. Chica Momon Jella, I'm the Roma Momo, Jella True Name, and chicken deadly. 10 hours I think of Fonzo, and now I tell her, Miki Domini to go young and see.
In our text, Karma continues to say in the next verse, there are many different perfection process practices, with focus and without focus. And to know these is necessary for those who teach many instructions to students. So as we heard before, also in this case, for those who are in the business of teaching to others, of passing on these instructions to students, for those it is indeed necessary to know all of these instructions in their entirety, to know all of these distinct ways of explaining these instructions in a thorough manner.
The bars Tangaron Songre, and Solom Naro, Shuju. Then Zorum Kayambala, Inter Mupadam, Gibayina, Zorum Igi Songre.
So, when talking of these different perfection process practices, with and without focus, with or without object, to give an example of these, one example would be, for instance, the 6 Doctrines of Naropa. These 6 Doctrines of Naropa clearly belong to the perfection process meditations which are practiced with a focus, because there are so many different things which are to be imagined, which are to be visualized. So these would serve as an example for perfection process meditation with focus.
Milarepa, Seng Monjai. This Seng Monjai and Denila, Data Naronso, Matoni, other Surgayola, Zambata, Shambata, Surgayola, Chapa, Ella Dini, and Chodon of Momo, Java Sabayan. The Sayan now get dancing country. She was a Gyulü to take on with.
To use an example from among the 6 Doctrines of Naropa, there is one practice which serves to bring about an understanding about the outer world of phenomena and appearances and everything that we hold so true and so dear within that world. It is said quite clearly time and again that all of these phenomena and appearances that we perceive so seemingly solid, so seemingly truly existent, are in the end nothing else but the self-expression of our own minds, of our own mind nature, nothing more, nothing less than that. Nevertheless, we are not really clear about that fact. We have not really realized or recognized that fact, and we hold these things, these appearances and phenomena, to be truly existent. That in turn gives rise to such emotional defilements as attachment, aversion, and everything that goes along with these. One of the practices from within these 6 Doctrines of Naropa, which is designed to eradicate this mistaken idea, this clinging, this aversion, this attachment, etc., and so forth, which might arise in the course of this mistaken perception, is the practice of illusory form. Yet again, among these 6 Doctrines of Naropa is another practice, another kind of training which enables us to realize all that which appears in dream state as being of an illusory nature, of being not truly existence. All of that which appears, which arises to us, which appears to us or arises within the dream state is nothing else but the expression of the habitual tendencies that we have formed in the waking state. So, in order to eradicate this idea of things that arise in dreams as being real, we practice the meditation of the dream state, which is also known as Dreamyoga. Then at a certain period during sleep, the phase of deep sleep happens, which is a state that is characterized by being completely or almost completely unconscious, so to speak. This is an expression of the, nothing else but an expression of the influence of the emotional defilement of ignorance. In order to clarify this, the influence of this emotional defilement and the various experiences which are being caused by it, we would practice the meditation of clear light or luminosity, which is yet again another one of the 6 Dharmas of Naropa. In order to eradicate all sorts of defilements, clingings, aversions, etc., which have arisen through union or sexual union and everything that goes along with it, to eradicate these, to purify these imprints, etc., we train ourselves in the meditation of inner heat, which is commonly known as Tummo.
Bardo Phowa
These four aforementioned practices are the main practices, the basic practices from among these 6 doctrines of Naropa. And then there are 2 more subsidiary practices, which are known as intermediate states and transference of consciousness, commonly known as Bardo or Phowa. So these 4 main practices plus the 2 subsidiary practices all together make up that which we know as the 6 doctrines or the 6 Dharmas of Naropa. So all of these practices which have been mentioned until now are called perfection process meditations with focus. With focus because there are certain things to be mentioned, certain visualizations to be practiced. And they're called perfection process because they serve to eradicate our clinging and our habitual tendencies which are being caused by the influences of various emotional defilements, such as the habitual tendencies which we form during the waking state, which are being eradicated through the practice of the illusory form, or the habitual tendencies which we give rise to during the dream state, which are being eradicated through Dreamyoga, or deep sleep, which is being counteracted by the practice of clear light or luminosity, etc., etc. So all of these bring about the purification and eradication of these habitual tendencies which are caused by these emotional defilements and the various influences of them. Also, the development process does much the same thing. It also eradicates all sorts of habitual tendencies and clingings and aversions, but of a rather more different nature. When it comes to perfection process meditations without focus, these would be the sort of practices in the course of which we familiarize ourselves with the way how our mind nature truly is. Also, when we come to the perfection process meditations without any focus, there are again several categories or several categories into which they are subdivided. The first of these 4, as they would be described within the completely focus one's mind in a completely one-pointed and a completely undistracted way upon something, upon an object or anything whatsoever. So this is the first of these 4 yogas of Mahamudra, which is known as one-pointedness. The second of these 4 yogas, or these 4 stages of development within the Mahamudra tradition, is commonly known as free of elaboration or free of conceptualization. This means nothing other but striving to achieve the realization of that which the Buddha himself has taught about mind nature, in which he has clearly pointed out how it is free of any particular characterization that we could possibly dump onto it. Commonly we hold on to either one or several or a combination of various ideas of either there being something or there being nothing, having completely evaporated, having completely gone or disappeared. We might also hold on to the idea that there is something which then eventually disappears, or there never having been anything in the first place. Or we might also express it in the other ways of mental constructs or ideas of there coming something into existence which then eventually disappears again, or something being existent and then all of a sudden non-existent, or we might think it never to have been existent in the first place, or we might think it to be truly existent all of the time. So all of these various ideas and concepts that we could possibly dump onto that which we call mind nature, which are mistaken ideas, which are erroneous concepts, all of these do not hold true. Once we have come to the point of having realized that none of these characterizations holds any truth, any reality onto itself or by itself, once we have understood and realized that that to be the case, we have then achieved the second of these 4 states, being free of elaboration or being free of conceptualizations.
Milarepa non-can follow with what? Daga to take on the Zumfrumanda Mombo and do what? Roth,
the next stage of familiarizing yourself with mind nature as it truly is would then be called literally one taste, which means to say that one comes to realize that all these different phenomena and appearances which appear so truly existent, which seem so solidly there, so to speak, that when it comes down to it, they actually share the same characteristic of being of one and the same nature. Even though they appear differently, they are of one and the same nature, and even though there seems to be such a great variety of different perceptions and experiences, etc., they all come down to that. They are all similar in that regard as of being of the same nature, not really being different at all, even though it might appear like this. Having achieved that state, one is then eventually able to perform all sorts of miraculous deeds, and being able to do so is indeed an indication of having realized that state. Having realized that state, for instance, the great master of yogins, Milarepa, was able to fly through the air. All of the great Mahasiddhas of India, of whom we know that they have performed lots of different miracles all the time. All of this being the case, then being able to demonstrate these miraculous deeds indicates that they had achieved that stage of one taste, as it's called.
Senga Nangcha Song. In Senga Nongcha, Yenayang, Naronson, and Senga dancing the shake the Ransom bucket, the shake your man. Senga dancing Majipala, and say no, and the Senga Nongcha, Yungu man. Sonji get somebody, the Yenayang, Naronson, Senga dancing Majipala, and say no, and Roth and Dreamyoga.
Even though without any doubt at all, it truly is as it has just been described. It truly is the case that all of these appearances, phenomena, perceptions, etc., and so forth, are truly of one and the same nature. The problem lies in our having habituated ourselves since ages, since beginnings time, so to speak, to perceive them as being externally, as being outwardly existent. We have habituated ourselves to perceiving things in such a way, to such an extent, that even though we know the words of the Buddha, even though we have heard the words of the masters of the past in this regard, we just cannot bring ourselves to truly experience the truth of these words, simply because we have this strong habit which makes us believe that there is an external world with everything that it seemingly exists within it, with everything that exists within this world, just because of this habituation of ours, which is extremely strong, which has been formed over many, many lifetimes. Simply because of that, we are not able to truly see, to truly understand or perceive the truth of these words, which are summarized in the idea of one taste.
And Milarepa and Kandoma, Lungting Chang. Pacharam Jagal Tomna and Chu Samuchi Charonga, better to Jurtobe, so Lungting Kandoma.
Once upon a time, the master of yogans, Milarepa, had a vision of a dakini, of a female deity, who spoke a prophecy to him. She told him, if you were able to go to India, then you would indeed be able to receive a very profound teaching, a very profound Dharma, which you could then bring back to Tibet. Now, Milarepa had already gotten on in age quite a bit and was somewhat elderly, and it was not really a good idea to travel to India at such a high age. So he thought to himself, that being the case, what could I do? And he decided to send one of his main students, who was known as Rechungpa, to India. So he talked to Rechungpa and said, you go to India instead of me, and you go and see the Mahasiddha, the master Tipupa, tell him of this prophecy and bring home that Dharma. And indeed, Rechungpa then traveled to India. He went into the presence of the Mahasiddha Tipupa, and he received from Tipupa a great number of transmissions of the oral transmission of Chakrasamvara, in particular the Chakrasamvara lineage. And having received all of these instructions and transmissions from Tipupa, he eventually traveled back to Tibet and offered these transmissions to his master, Milarepa. As Rechungpa was on his way back to Tibet, he gave rise to all sorts of ideas and also to a certain amount of pride. He thought to himself, indeed I am the student of the Lord of Yogans, Milarepa, who has incomparably great blessings and who was able to perform all sorts of miracles. However, he was not able to travel to India. It was I who traveled to India. Even though Milarepa is so great and he is my teacher and my Root Lama, he was not able to meet the Mahasiddha Chikapa and receive these oral transmissions of Chakra Samvara. It was I who went into the presence of Chikapa and who received all of these transmissions. And he actually gave rise to this idea that even though in a formal way he was Milarepa's student, that to a certain extent his own qualities had become even somewhat greater than Milarepa's. So in this way, pride arose in him as he was on his way back to Tibet, back to Milarepa.
And in Milarepa, Gungore, Naranke, Roma, Rechungpa, Naja Chimbo, Lendo, Gong. I think I'm Tapsi, Korogan, Naja, the Mamma, Gungore.
Milarepa was, of course, perfectly aware of the fact that Rechungpa, on his way back home, had given rise to such excessive pride. And he started to think about a good, skillful means of how to eradicate that pride of Rechumpa's.
And Milarepa, Manjela, something. Taring Marani, Chomchomla, Rogovi, and Chomchomla, Ma Tamchamo, Yore, Atinoni, Chomchomla, Pepsona. Mana, York, Rashu, Yore. Milarepa, Yade, Rechungpa, York, Rashu, the Kursu, Milam said, Gyulü de Bachelo. No man didn't send Gyulü de Bachelo. Gyulü de Bachelo, Yamada, you can't say good. Oh, that's all the Kokati. The Bayomari, Hinaya, Gyulü de Bachelo, Yamada, oh, that's all the Kokati.
One day, Milarepa then invited Rechungpa to go for a walk. And as they went for a walk, they came upon a large plain, very flat area, not a rock, not a tree or anything inside, it was just that plain. And as they walked across that plain, they came upon a yak horn that was just lying there in the grass. And as Milarepa walked past, he said to Rechungpa, take up the yak horn and take it along. And Rechungpa thought to himself, how strange. He never made any fuss about such possessions before. He never expressed any desire to collect any such things, let alone such a useless thing as a yak horn. But trying to be an obedient student, he said, yeah, all right, if you think so. He picked it up and put it somewhere into his garments, and he walked along in such a way that he actually expressed some doubt about the sanity of Milarepa. What on earth do we want with a yak horn all of a sudden now? But if he wants me to take it, well, okay, here we go. Picked it up and then tagged along. So having picked up that yak horn, he just trudged along after Milarepa, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there that large black cloud appeared. Soon afterwards, there was lots of thunder, and it didn't take much longer that all of a sudden rain and hail started pounding down. Rechungpa got rather nervous, and he started looking around for some sort of shed or some sort of shelter where he could go for protection. He threw away that yak horn, just tossed it away somewhere, and started looking around everywhere if there wouldn't be a place where one could find some safety from the hail and the rain.
Sherab, Sherab is your tongue. And Milarepa, Gorga, Draga, Gorga, Draga, two way. Milarepa, your song. You didn't Milarepa song, Cherry two way. And I take no. Then got some yoga, you know that, and got some yoga. Then my day, yoga, you know that. Milarepa was for pardon, young, that's cool. Don't them Yori Bugla, those of it. So, Abadam, Milarepa, Mother, Tipa, that's her rattle known as this house. Don't them with the Yora known and dogs.
So Rechungpa had tossed the horn away and he was frantically searching for shelter, which of course he didn't find. He was completely dripping wet, drenched in water, and hail was coming down on his head, and he got increasingly nervous when all of a sudden he realized Milarepa wasn't to be found anywhere. He looked around left and right, upside down, back and forth. Milarepa was just not to be seen anywhere, and he thought, how strange. Where is he gone? Where has he disappeared to? As the hail then abated a little bit, and it wasn't quite so loud anymore, all of a sudden he heard Milarepa's voice from somewhere, singing a beautiful song, singing a beautiful melody, and he thought to himself, like, where on earth? Where is he? And he looked around everywhere and still couldn't find him, until he decided to follow the sound of the voice, which, you've guessed it, led him to the yak horn. He was completely amazed because there was that useless horn which he had tossed away, which of course is a rather small thing, and apparently the voice of Milarepa seemed to come out of this yak horn. So, being completely drenched and dripping, wet and miserable already, he just kneeled down into the mud and he just peered inside the yak horn, and lo and behold, who did he see inside that yak horn? Milarepa. Milarepa was sat there, quite nice, comfortably, dry, snug and smug. And Milarepa said to him, well, if you're the same as your old teacher, well, come on in. I'm moving to the narrower part of it. And you can sit down in the wider part, and we can have ourselves a jolly good time sitting here and waiting for the weather to clear up.
And then, Rechungpa son, Milarepa,
And Milarepa said again, if you consider yourself to be the same as your old father, well then come on in. And Rechungpa thought to himself, well, if the master says so, then I should try my best. And he bent down and he stooped down and he tried to get into the horn, but of course nothing would work. He could not even get his hand inside.
And then Milarepa the yin of Mara, yin Marangam Kipari, Mundu, the other thing, Milarepa the Zobra, Maran Sang, Naja Shavarsa, Lamala, Mu Chepatin Jaw, then the garden chamber, Yan Son, then Rechungpa Kung, Shamuta, York, Raju, Sope, Shamuka, then Rijakapo, Razu, Naptila. And Raju, Zoki Shamuti, Nama, the Lama Garden Chamber, Lama Tessa, but the Dixie, Shamati, Kupabati, Lepaniva. This is so bad, so just as Nadi Shamos is old. This is all the teacher. You also just a man that takes all of the two is a old.
On that occasion, Rechungpa clearly realized that he was not anywhere close in his abilities or in his realization to Milarepa, that indeed Milarepa was the incomparably greater one of the two, and that he was merely an ordinary disciple when compared to Milarepa. And in this way, his pride was broken. He experienced the occasion of being pointed out the influence of an emotional defilement, in that particular case, the one of pride, which he was able to give up in that moment and to truly perceive his teacher as he truly was in this moment. Then later on, in order to remind himself of this event, and in order to remind himself of how his pride was being eradicated through this miraculous deed of Milarepa's, he made himself a hat which has the shape of a yakhorn. He made it of white felt, and in the shape of a yakhorn, and he is commonly shown, or painted, or depicted with this hat. And then Christopher asked to clarify, he asked Rinpoche whether or not Milarepa gave that hat to Rechungpa, or whether he made it himself, and indeed it was Rechungpa who made it himself. If Milarepa had given Rechungpa that hat, he would very likely have made more fun of him by way of first giving him one that would be too large, and giving him another one that would be too small. So in the end, Rechungpa had to make it for himself, which is what he did. So if indeed we would be able to truly experience phenomena and appearances as being fundamentally one nature, if indeed we would have achieved the realization of that state which is known as one taste, then also we would be able to perform such miracles as we have just talked about. The next step then, or the final step, the fourth of these yogas of Mahamudra, or stages of Mahamudra realization, is known as no more training or non-meditation. At that particular point we have eradicated even the subtlest veils and obscurations, and our perception in the daytime and the nighttime has become absolutely equal. There is no difference for us anymore between daytime or nighttime, between waking state or dream state, and at that particular point also the necessity for sleep has completely vanished. We would then simply at all times rest in that recognition, and we would have achieved that state which is characterized by not having to train, not having to meditate in any which way anymore. All of these aforementioned stages or realizations which are being brought about through these various practices, they would be summarized under the heading of development or of perfection process without focus. So these various methods, these various ways of completion or perfection process meditation, either with focus or without focus, their distinct traditions, the particular ways of how to explain them, how to teach them to students, should indeed be known, should indeed be studied thoroughly and distinctly, unmistakably, by those who have to teach them to others, by those who are in a position to have to teach a certain number or a great number of students. Those who are in the business of teaching these, they have to know all of these various traditions, their distinctions, and have to be able to explain them to students in an unmistaken way. However, if you were only after bringing about realization and insight into mind nature for yourself, if you do not plan to become a teacher who sits on a throne and teaches all of these methods to students, then it would indeed be sufficient to summarize all of these teachings and instructions into easily practice the meditation practice and make your experiences in this way. Accordingly, our verse here in Conceptualization's text says, these are necessary for those who teach many instructions, but as a method for developing your own experiences, realization, qualities, etc., it is rather more profound to abide in one's own nature, which contains all. So in this way, to summarize all of these different ways and methods, all of these instructions, or to practice their essence as a single practice, that would, as the last line of this verse says, be the truly profound thing for the individual practitioner. That is exactly being done by way of praying to one's teacher, of practicing the meditation upon one's teacher, praying one pointedly from the bottom of your heart to the teacher, and then simply merge the teacher's mind stream with your own, and then simply rest within that natural state. For the individual practitioner to rest in this essential, in this essence, or to practice this essential instruction is the rather more profound way of proceeding. When practicing in this way, we would be well advised to be free of any hope and of any fear pertaining to the practice itself. We could easily give rise to the hope as we sit down on our cushion about to begin our practice session that during this session or during several such sessions of such practice that some signs of success might appear. Some signs that show us that we're going the right way, that everything is going well, and that we are successful in our practice. It's rather easy to give rise to such hope. It would be rather more advisable to be free of such hope, not to give rise to such hope in the first place. On the other hand, it is also very easy to give rise to fear. Fear of the practice, not being successful, fear of possibly going wrong or going off in the wrong direction by way of doing such practice, and all sorts of fears along these lines. So while practicing along these lines, while practicing in this way, free yourself to the best of ability of both hope and fear. As we then sit in this way and practice, eventually and invariably at some time or other, a thought will move again. A thought will appear within our minds, mental activity will start to make itself felt again. And when that happens, in this particular moment when the thought arises, whatever thought it might be, there's no necessity whatsoever to cut this thought short, or to suppress this thought in any which way. Simply leave it as it is. Don't do anything about it. At the same time, you should also take care not to follow that thought. If such a thought appears, it might easily develop into a whole train of thoughts, and you might think, I have to go to such and such a place tomorrow, or, oh, well, I might have to perform this and that duty tomorrow, I have such and such work to do, and in this way, all of a sudden you're completely washed away by all sorts of thoughts. whenever a thought appears, simply welcome it as a focus of your further attention and simply leave it at that. No need to suppress it, no need whatsoever to follow it. Simply leave it as it is by itself, and that's that. Nothing else to be done.
I tried on the trot.
Questions?
I'm sure that he doesn't want now.
Yet again, let us conclude by way of dedicating the marriage for the sake of